Tayo gang lipad ng saranggola ni Pepe. Tayo gang pangarap ng matandang tingi. Umihip ang hangin, nawala sa paningin. Sigaw ng kahapon, nilamon ng alon. Malabo ang tunog ng kampanilya ni Padre. Maingay ang tagiting rosaryo ng babae.
A young Filipino should know that Filipinos have been in America for a long time. In fact, they go all the way back to the days of Spanish galleon ships that came to the New World.
Sa piling ni nanay, nais ko'y maulit ang awit ni inang mahal, awit ng pag-ibig habang ako'y nasa duyan.
Filipinos should know that the city of Los Angeles was discovered by a Spanish expedition led by a Filipino.
There's a lot of conquistadors, foreigners from lands of other places, kept coming to our islands and stabbing us for fun. Remember those days? Until we kicked them out in 1898. Boy, were they sore fucking losers.
The Filipino-American experience begins on October 18, 1587, when a landing party from the Manila galleon sends ashore a group of Spanish soldiers, one Catholic priest, and 8 Luzones Indios, meaning Filipinos, who were part of the crew. They landed on Morro Bay, near what is now San Luis Obispo in California. It therefore means that the first presence of Filipinos setting foot in the continental United States happened in 1587. But the permanent settlement of Filipinos actually begins as early as 1763 in the bayous of Louisiana, and again by other deserters of Manila galleons. By the early 1900s and after the cessation of hostilities in the Philippines, 1902, we had a new phenomenon as well called war brides. Now these are Asian war brides of Philippine ancestry, and that's because of the Spanish-American War. Along with them eventually comes the Sacadas in 1906 to fill the demand for labor in Hawaii in the sugar cane fields. Follow that along particularly with pensionados. Pensionados meaning government-supported students who were to come. Their mission was to attend the major American universities, train them so that they could go back to the Philippines and begin to administrate that particular country according to the American way. Followed that were other schoolboys, in other words, many, many men and women to pursue an education. This blows the myth that the only ones who came were workers in the fields and cannery workers. The ratio also was 14 men to 1 woman. This, we want to emphasize very, very much that it was not only men, bachelors who came, in some cases these were families, and there certainly were women. Filipinos comprised America's newest workforce, an army of able-bodied men who harvested, tilled, picked, planted, did everything from the Central Valley of California, through the orchards, as well as in other states, through Arizona, through Montana, through Idaho. And we even found eventually these migrant workers going as far as New York. They were among those that made stoop labor in particular productive. Stoop labor and having to cut asparagus and pick tomatoes and plant celery, as well as peaches and grapes and all those things that we as Americans take for granted in our on our tables. Filipinos did that. I come from a migrant family. I cannot remember all of the grammar schools I ever attended. When the crops finished, off we would go again to another site to catch another season, another crop. It affected me possibly in that there were really no roots. However, though, when I look back, it was a grand experience in that I learned my ethnicity through that migrant camp life. I had so many uncles I can't even think of. When you have 100 men in your camp, they are all your uncles. And in cases, their women are my aunts. And through life, they have been that. Some of them became so close to me that they were part of my extended family. I learned what hard work was, and I also appreciated what that generation had to go through. Popularly, Filipinos were always recorded in America's workforce in the plantations of Hawaii, the agricultural fields of California, and the canneries, the Alaska fish canneries. You'd also find them in kitchen work, you'd find them in hotel work, you found them in major urban cities where menial jobs were open.
My first job working in San Francisco hotel as kitchen helper. We used to wash dishes, wash the pan, wash big drum for sabaw, soup, and everything in polished silver, everything in the kitchen, mop the floor, take care of the kitchen, take care of the stoves, so that it would be nice and clean.
All throughout, Filipinos have always cleaned America, they've always cooked for America, and they've always harvested for America. And that to me is a tremendously great contribution. It may not be so dramatic, it may not sound so world-shaking, but nevertheless, that's how America survived.
I was going to complete my education here. I went to school in LA to be a lawyer, but I found out that Filipinos cannot practice law in this country. They cannot even own farms. Nothing we can do. I got so disgusted. I said, why am I studying law when I cannot even practice law in the States? So I quit. I spent 3 years in college, and then I went to organize our people on the farms.
In terms of formal discrimination, well, Filipinos were considered nationals. That was a legal term. They couldn't vote. They couldn't hold federal jobs. They couldn't own property. My father had a house in North Portland, and come to find out later, legally you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have owned the property.
Filipinos in the 20s and the 30s, the 40s, before World War II, were little brown monkeys. Kicked off the streets, put down jobs, all the flagrant racism that could ever be given to them, especially when they became a threat to the economic life. Riots, bombings of various vigilante actions against Filipinos in both rural and urban areas. And much more so, approximately 16 states throughout the United States had that anti-miscegenation law, with the exception of Washington, Illinois. It affected Filipinos in that it did not give them the opportunity to marry a white woman legally.
What set apart the Filipinos in Louisiana and Filipinos from the other parts of the United States was that the Filipinos in Louisiana did not experience the same discrimination or other adverse factors that very detrimental to their existence. Filipinos in Louisiana were accepted by the whole American population. They were able to own their property. They were considered whites, and they were just left alone to do their own occupation as fishermen.
In the 4th grade, I tried to wash the brownness off my hands. I thought that I was different. Why did I live in a boxcar? Why did I live in a bunkhouse that you could see through the walls? Why was it that we were forever always in the camps? And why is it that my dad always had to work with his hands out in the fields if he wasn't doing some part-time carpentering or whatever? Why is it that our people were basically relegated to a certain section in town? Well, you know, when you have a gut ache and a stomach ache and it hurts, all you know is that your stomach hurts. But you don't quite know what it is. You think in some ways that's just a natural thing. We didn't realize, for instance, that in living in a ghetto, that was rank discrimination. The blatant and flagrant racism as I was growing up, so seeing signs, no Filipinos allowed in hotels, no Filipinos served in restaurants, to not be able to go to certain places.
And the reason I got my first job was pretty obvious. I had the right color skin, and I had a Spanish last name. But then they looked at me and said, "What is this guy?" Because I'm not, you know, I'm sort of an Asian-looking, kind of strange-looking person.
Every immigrant goes through the process of discrimination, language, and all of that.
I think one thing that I always remember as a kid, especially me and my sister, was like, you know, like the old school mentality, especially colonial mentality that a lot of our family and friends, they do bring from the old country. You know, it's our history, but man, there's this thought in our community that having dark skin, you're going to have a harder life in our community. It's like, no way. No way. We're all equal, right? No way. Dark skin, no way. You're not going to have a problem. No way. But it was true. It was true. Especially my sister, who's a little darker skinned than me. All right, she's hella dark. We were dark kids. Well, she was more dark because she was more of the jock. She was an athlete, always playing soccer, whatever, cheerleading, I don't know, anything. She was always out in the sun. So when she'd come home, oh, my mom would just get into her. "Joy, you're so dark, Joy. Oh my God, Jesus Christ, you're so dark, Joy. You're so dark. Look at your skin, you're so dark. You're too dark, Joy." See, that's kind of wrong, right? That's stuff that we need to like deprogram from ourselves, right? We get caught up in this colonial matrix shit, and that shit is real, right? So we need to change that with our generation. Gee, it would have been cool way back in those days if you had things that help empower you as a child of color, as a Pinoy of pigment?
60% of your Filipino population is still first generation. Being first generation, their concerns are still Philippines rather than America. And that makes a whole lot of difference in how we see ourselves in our adoptive country and how people, non-Filipinos, perceive us as well.
Many Filipinos from the Philippines still have a very strong accent, and their accents clearly set them as being foreigners. In America's mind, the Philippines is much more a presence in their consciousness than Filipinos. But when they think of Filipinos, they think of people in the Philippines. It isn't a very clear concept in their minds that Filipino Americans are a very large part of the minority community in the U.S. That there are more than 3 million Filipinos in the U.S. So in that sense, we're invisible.
Parents, students, and the community at large, welcome to the 1977 ESL graduating evening. I'm your host and teacher, Mrs. Scott. Tonight, we are about to embark on a tour, a journey, if you will, of the English language. As you can already tell, I'm perfecting it. I have no accent whatsoever. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2, mic check 1 2, testing. Can you hear it? Neither can I. I want to give a little background about the ESL program. Let me share a story that really grips me, that really touched me here. One of my top students during the parent-teacher conference just the other day, in the classroom, I gave them some privacy. I was hiding under the desk. This is what I overhear him say to his parents. He said, "Mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy." Okay, maybe I added one more daddy. Okay. He said, "Mommy, daddy, you have to come to Mrs. Scott's class." It's so hard. I'm sorry for the children. Hold it together. Hold. Okay. Mommy, daddy, you have to come to Mrs. Scott's class. She's my favorite teacher. You have to come and see her tits. I'm touched. I'm touched. Are you touched? I'm touched. I'm very touched. Let's touch each other, okay? So without further ado, I want to bring up our very first graduate for this evening. When he first came to my class, I thought to myself, I think he's a Mongoloid. But I look at his paper, he's not from Mongolia. He was just sleepy. He's from the part of the world known as the Philippines. Oh, you don't know where that is? I'm not from there, I'm from Guam. Half a day. Come on, let's take a look at the world map here. The Philippines is the southernmost island of Spain. It's very tiny, very tiny. Move near Guam now. So without further ado, please help me welcome in his very first English sentence. I'm so proud. 3, 2, 1. Mr. Rex Navarrete. Come on, Rex. Stop crying. You stop crying. Stop. You stop. You're embarrassing me. Stop crying. You stop. Stop crying. You want belt or slipper? You want? Huh? Don't piss me out. Do not piss me out. If you stay there, that's the Philippines. You come here, this America. That's the Philippines, this America. Without further ado, would you please help me welcome the very brightened Mr. Rex Navarrete. So my very first English sentence, perfected.
The cow knocked over the moon.
Basically, there used to be a saying that if you have two Filipinos, you'd have three organizations. Your organization, my organization, and our organization. Filipinos just love to get together. In January 1942, President Roosevelt changed the law, and Americans, Filipino Americans, then wanted to enter the military. One of the things that they wanted to do was form a unit to go back to the Philippines to defend it. So in February 1942, the 1st Filipino Battalion was formed in San Luis Obispo. And the staffing of this unit consisted of Filipinos who were stranded in the United States. The units eventually became large enough to form two regiments, the 1st Filipino and 2nd Filipino Infantry Regiments. The Filipinos were given an opportunity to become citizens in 1943 by virtue of the fact that they were serving in the military. A Gallup poll was held around May 1942 to see if these Filipinos who were serving the military should be given the opportunity to become citizens. And it was overwhelmingly supported by the American people. In February 1943, there was a mass swearing-in ceremony at Camp Beale, California, for the 1st Filipino Infantry Regiment. And there, over 400 Filipinos took the oath of allegiance to the U.S. to become citizens. And this continued throughout the time frame that the 1st Regiment and 2nd Regiments were in the United States. The Filipinos were scattered throughout the various services during World War II. We had some in the Marine Corps, we had them in the Air Corps, and of course we had the notorious affair where the Filipinos were strictly stewards in the U.S. Navy. World War II opened the doors of opportunities to Filipino civilians who did not go into the military. They moved into the defense industries, working as welders, the shipyards, riveters in the aircraft factories, and as the male population moved out of the civilian government positions, Filipinos moved into them. You had Filipinos who were trained as engineers, could not work as engineers in the 30s, now working for the government as engineers and scientists.
Many in our community, a lot of students, don't have the identity as Filipinos to fight for a Filipino identity. You know, in other words, to fight for something, you must have that identity to want to fight for it. So if you grow up without that identity, what are you going to do to fight for one?
Whether you're an immigrant or you're born here, that there are certain obligations and privileges that you get from being an American. You should never forget that.
Appreciate your culture, to be proud of what it took to make you what you are.
You can't get to where you're going if you don't know where you came from. So I'm very proud that when I was in the Philippines, someone wrote me a message and said, you know, you're an American, but you're Filipino, and Philippines will always be in your heart.
The pride in one's culture, in one's ethnic identity, that's what it means to define oneself as a Filipino American.
Return to a land called Paraiso.
There is also the effects of Philippine independence, meaning now the immigration quota is raised from 50 to 100 a year. And then after that, 200 a year. And this goes on from 1945 until 1965. So our community begins to change.
We spoke English because our parents only wanted to speak English. And we were accepted. We went to the parties. We played the games. We played football. We were on the teams. We went to the Saturday night dances. But today you can look back and you see that maybe we were playing a game. We were playing a game because we wanted to be accepted. And maybe the ones that were the real Filipinos were those that took pride in themselves and spoke the language, ate the food, and took the hits because they wanted to be Filipinos.
We would go to these Filipino dances and gatherings and so on, but part of my father and said, well, Don, me, and my brother, you were born in this country. You are Americanized, therefore you will be American and you will forget about your Filipino aspect of your heritage. So I think he's kind of ambivalent about that. And I remember asking him many times, please teach me Tagalog. He said, no, you don't want to learn Tagalog, learn English.
I believe that the Filipinos in Louisiana are very unique in a sense that they are very proud of their heritage. The 8 to 10 generations are still a part of the Filipino society.
Our country was peopled by immigrants. And when we're speaking about the plantation system and the Filipinos, they were a group that settled in the plantations. And the important thing is that the Filipinos helped to develop Hawaii the way it is today. And since Hawaii is part of the United States, it helped to develop the United States.
And so it is important to teach them history, from whence they came, so they can understand the things that are happening today and how they can be able to survive as individuals tomorrow. It's also important in that as individuals, as Filipino Americans, that we give something to this country. America has much to be able to benefit from that which we as Filipino Americans have. just these few minutes, more than 400 years of a rich tapestry has been touched. Touched. Only through 1965, the beginning of the fourth immigration wave of Filipinos to the United States. There is a lot more to tell of Filipino-American history, and so the story of Filipino Americans continues.